So I had experienced my first panic attack, and I went, "Oh, so that's what people mean when they say that." Which, if you try explaining that to a physician, that you have chronically elevated heart rate, mildly elevated blood pressure, and any emotion you feel grants you pain, well, what are they going to say? They're going to go, "Well, blood test results came back normal. You're totally fine." You create a lot of tension, and tension is an emotion, and that would cause me pain. So I was discouraged physiologically from actually engaging in any sort of, contention. First, I go blind for a second, but then I keel over, so I don't even have time to think about what just happened, because now I have to think on the pain. I have to think about the pain I'm currently experiencing before I can even relegate brain power to what just now happened with my vision. So it's this whole thing that I always had to deal with. Well, I go into the bathroom and having to get fed by my dad, and floor bound and not being able to even use the bathroom myself because I couldn't walk to the bathroom. So that was something that I had to contend with. Well, I tell the head of the ER that day, and he comes back in, he kneels down to look at me, and he says, "Okay, I want you to listen to me. Every single thing that your chiropractor told you was complete voodoo science nonsense. What you have is anxiety, and you're dehydrated." That's what he told me. He looked at me and he said, word for word, he said, "If you had come any later, you were on your way for something catastrophic." And that's doctor talk for, well, we all know what. And we all knew what when we were sitting in the room. My dad and my grandma were there.
So we have Eddie Goeke on again, and not only that, he is going to be sharing his story. Now, I think his story is quite amazing. So honestly, it's a pretty inspiring in my opinion, but it's also it's pretty harsh. So please tell us about your story, Eddie.
As most harsh things often are. But yeah, so I'm going to try and keep this as terse as possible, considering that it is very lengthy, but it will be lengthy nevertheless. So I hope that you can understand. But and that goes for the viewers as well. But yeah, so basically my whole story starts whenever I was 16 years old, freshly 16. Um, I was an average kid back then. I was attending, public high school like everyone else was there at the time. I was a sophomore, no, junior in high school at that point. And during my second hour class, so very early morning still, I had a strength training class. And this was regular. I started this during my sophomore year. Um, and so after the class was over, I was pretty winded. More winded than I would be now if I had done the same thing, considering that I was powered at the time on a 6-pack of mini chocolate donuts and some juice pouches that were offered at the cafeteria. But I was migrating over to my third hour chemistry class, and I sat down, and I remember my teacher, she kept the room quite warm, and so it just added to my fatigue. And so I saw myself very slowly drifting into a sleep. But the problem was whenever I, had laid my head down on the table, something completely unexpected happened and abrupt. I started to get butterflies in my stomach, and everyone knows what that feeling is. But the problem is that it happened for no apparent reason at all. Usually, whenever you feel butterflies in your stomach, there is a stimulus. You're nervous about something. You're thinking about something in the future. You're portending something, or something is being anticipated. Well, in my case, that was not happening at all. It was purely, strictly physical, which elicited fear from me, of course, because if I'm feeling that feeling and my heart rate is just starting to increase without any apparent stimulus, then that's going to freak me out. But feedback loop, when I get freaked out, then it makes the symptoms worse. So I start getting very afraid, and this is taking place over the course of just a few seconds, really. But given the fear that was starting to really intrude my mind, I was starting to behave really irrationally. So I was, darting my eyes around the room, trying to, again, irrationally observe and assess whether other people were experiencing the same feelings I was. Just that's like an innate, primitive sort of reptilian brain response there. But obviously, it didn't make any sense. So I eventually had to raise my hand and ask to go to the bathroom, just to leave the room. And then I did. I sat down in the bathroom, and I was thinking, that was really weird. I called my parents to pick me up. I was dropped off at my dad's house, and I thought of it as just a fluke till I realized I very quickly realized what had actually happened. I had had a panic attack. I didn't realize that it had happened when it happened because I'd never experienced them before. So I had experienced my first panic attack, and I went, "Oh, so that's what people mean when they say that." Because since I hadn't experienced one before, I didn't I always thought that it was sort of metaphorical or something when people said it. I didn't realize it was an actual phenomenon. I was pretty naive. So yeah, I wrote it off as a fluke whenever I went to my room with a plate full of pizza rolls and grapes, might I add, just, just to add to the yeah.
Fuel to the
Um,
fire.
yeah, exactly. Little did I know though, this is actually where the story starts to get really, really, um, serious. I didn't really know what it felt like to truly have my life fall apart, and that's what happened. These things did not stop. It became a quotidian, regular thing where every single time that I would wake up, I would have symptoms of POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, where if I stood up, my pulse rate would increase to 120, 130 BPM. My blood pressure remained pretty stable. Maybe it increased a little bit, but it was mainly my pulse rate. But not only that, the butterflies in my stomach were still there. I couldn't take deep breaths to, quell the pulse rate at all. Nothing was happening in that regard. But things kept progressing. So I basically had a homeostatic heart rate of like 130 BPM 24/7. That's not good. That's not good at all. Um, and mildly elevated blood pressure. But the worst symptom of all, which is something that was completely inexplicable to every single physician that I actually approached and discussed this with desperately to try and descry an answer about this as to what was going on, was extreme, excruciating pain when experiencing any emotion, whether it be positive or negative, or whether it be severe or slight. Um, I could have slight anxiety or slight excitement or anticipation about something. Either way, it would cripple me. I'd have to sit down. I'd have to usually lie down on the ground on my back or on my side to ameliorate that problem. Which if you try explaining that to a physician that you have chronically elevated heart rate, mildly elevated blood pressure, and any emotion you feel grants you pain, well, what are they going to say? They're going to go, well, blood test results came back normal. You're totally fine. And also, does your family have a history of anxiety disorders? Now, as much as it's really easy for me to denigrate them for that, and it's really easy to denigrate physicians for good reasons, you can't necessarily hold it against them that much, because when someone presents with that stuff and you list them out that way, of course, Occam's razor, you're gonna think, well, it's right in front of our eyes what the problem is. However, the problem is that I kept telling them that it was a physical sensation that would cripple me anytime I would experience emotion, which is a little different than the presented symptoms or reported symptoms of anxiety and other depressive disorders as well that go alongside that. I continued to deteriorate though. I was staying home from school 4 out of 5 days out of the week, maybe 3 out of the 5. I mean, still, that's pretty over half the week, every single week. Um, but there were differences between the 2 households I was staying at. My parents have been divorced since I was 2 years old, so it wasn't a destructive divorce or a distressing one on me. I have lived with split custody between parents, with them having a good relationship for basically my entire life, so that's not a problem. But, since I had split custody, there were differences in the way that my parents handled the situation. So in one area, one corner, we've got my dad, who actually believed me 100% from the beginning that something was actually going on that was not mentally manifested. or at least exclusively mentally manifested, like with depression or anxiety. I was developing those, but that's not what the instigator was here. That's not what was happening. I was developing anxiety and depression that were truly originating from the mind because I wasn't going to school. I wasn't seeing friends because I couldn't. I couldn't even walk around my house comfortably because of the pot symptoms and because of the pain in my solar plexus here in the rib cage area. And so I was thinking, well, you know, this really sucks because now I'm actually developing anxiety and depression, but it's as a result of something else that people are already purporting to be anxiety and depression. So it doesn't help my case. So I was in for a world of hurt here. And so my dad believed me from the very beginning, and he accommodated and tried to console and succor me. But the problem is, whenever I go to my mom's, that was a different story. Not only was I living with my mom in the other corner, it was also my stepdad, and you know they don't really watch these videos, so I'll just go ahead and say this. My stepdad fits the stepdad stereotype, like to a T. Um, Authoritative, just extremely despotic and overbearing, um, narcissistic tendencies, basically treats me as if I am his child, but whenever he's responsible for taking care of me or providing for me and making sacrifices for me, well, he doesn't do that because I'm not his child. So he basically gets to discipline me as much as he wants, but he doesn't have to sacrifice for me because. So what ended up happening though was my mom was highly driven by his influence as to how I should and should not be disciplined. And so what happened was whenever I would report what I was experiencing, I was not listened to in the same way that my dad was. I was told I was forced to go to school despite my problems because it's all in my head. They said that to me. Um, and it wasn't fun, but I gave into it far easily than I should have for 2 reasons. Number 1, whenever you object to tyranny, let's say, and that might be a dramatic term in this situation, but you get what I'm saying here.
I
Like,
know where you're going here.
yeah. When you object to tyranny, not only do you lose a lot of things, it was mainly you create a lot of tension, and tension is an emotion, and that would cause me pain. So I was discouraged physiologically from actually engaging in any sort of, contention. The second reason that I went along with it, though, was because I have had, ever since I was sentient, a high, powerful inculcation of discipline, self-discipline, and work ethic into me. So even if I have a valid excuse for not engaging in any work or responsibility, even if it is valid, my brain doesn't register it as it being valid. I continue to push myself more than I should be pushed, therefore, so if I'm sick, I still go to school because I go, "Well, that's the right thing to do. That's the right thing to do. That's the right thing to do." So those are the twofold reasons why I would just go along with it. I was like, "Fine, I'll go." Despite the fact that I was very vociferously, vehemently objecting to it, even when my brain was still saying, "No, they're right," even though that part of my brain was not right. They're not right at all. But that part of my brain was still there, so I still would have pushed myself. The problem was, despite how hard I was already pushing myself without them pushing me to go to school and all that stuff, um, I was still looked at as faking it in a way, or like it being in my head and just being dramatic. I was told that I was dramatic most all the time. So anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about the stuff that ended up happening later on. Um, I continued to force myself to go to school, especially whenever I was staying with my mom. And so therefore I completely deteriorated. We don't know what's going on at this point. I've seen a neurologist who said that I had slight neuropathy in my elbow and I needed to gain some weight. That was the um, diagnosis. So basically he said that because I needed some fat to insulate my bone and nerves to prevent any impingement on the nerves by bone or something. It's silly, it's inane, it's ridiculous, but we already knew that, right? Because we're on sensible channels right now. But it's stuff like that. I got a GI scope done because I had some gastric problems. I eventually got on a blood pressure lowering drug, which was propranolol, which helped a little bit, actually. Those drugs that function as beta blockers are actually pretty helpful in situations like this. They regulate blood pressure and also sensation or emotion mediated cardiovascular differences or alterations. So, if you get anxious, your heart rate usually goes up. Those beta blockers will keep it steady no matter how much you try. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty surreal whenever you're experiencing it. You're like, this is really weird, but it worked. And so, but the problem was the sinking feeling in my stomach only got worse. That didn't get better from the medication. So it felt like I was just going through panic attacks without an elevated heart rate, just an 80 BPM heart rate. Really weird, really crazy. Normal blood pressure as well doing the same thing. So it still was not comforting. Later down the line, I got a job during the lockdowns at Walmart, actually. So yes, first of all, it was weird that I got a job during the lockdowns whenever everyone was losing their jobs at the time. But the reason why that happened was because um, I hadn't had school for a while, given the COVID thing. You can bleep that word out for the channel if you need to. Um, but I wasn't going to school, therefore, but I also wasn't working because of my symptoms. Uh, but eventually, what happened is it was my stepdad with my mom on standby, saying, "If you do not get a job, we are going to basically take away everything that you have, all communication to your friends. So cellular, anything you have taken away, your computer, you're taken away, everything like that." And so I said, "Well, hold on a minute. That seems a little irrational considering that we're in the middle of lockdowns." And he said, "Well, considering you didn't start to try and get one whenever you freshly turned 16, this is what you get." So that was his rationale for it. Fortunately, I did actually get a job. It was at Walmart. Now, you might think that that's some sort of leisurely sinecure where I get to just stand there and get paid for effectively doing a very, very easy job. And that is very much the case for a lot of positions at Walmart, except for the one that I got, arguably, like the only one that isn't like that. I was a fresh kept two worker. Um, and what that means is that I was in the warehouse for basically the entire part of the day, my shifts. Now, is it the hardest job in the world? No, but given my situation that is completely arcane and obscure in terms of what it actually is, still at this given instance in time in the story, it very well was. I was working in extremely cold freezers and coolers a lot of the time, which would mess with my symptoms and the breathing difficulties that I'd have. Lifting a lot of heavy things, which at the time were much heavier than they would be for me now, because I was also not able to engage in any resistance training or anything to even try and contend with the world in any way. So I was very weak, and I was losing a lot of muscle more than other people can maintain it, even when they're not resistance training as well, because of my diet. And we'll get into the diet realm later on. But anyway, I ran myself into the dirt. I didn't know. I continued every single day after work and during work to try and figure out what was going on with me. Didn't really know what was going on, so I just continued to go to work. That was the only thing that kept me away from. It was my escape, was working. And that was the case for most of my life. It's been that way. Studying, working, unless someone really tells me that I need to do something. So in school, I didn't really get the best grades in high school because as soon as someone would tell me to do something, I didn't want to do it. But on my own time, if I wanted to escape something, I absolutely would study on my own, and I still do that. And I work worked at my first job for that reason as well. Uh, and then what ended up happening was I got a new job at Target. So I just changed corporations. And the reason why was because of an increased pay, sure, but also um, it was because it was a far more leisurely job. I thought, okay, well, I need to escape this warehouse because whatever's going on with me, it's making it worse. Um, and during this whole time, I continued to try and pretend like I was normal, but I always said that I had some issue going on in passing with friends, but they didn't really think of it as anything serious because and it's not their fault. It's because I made myself appear as if I was as normal as possible. So why would they think that anything serious was going on if I was fighting my hardest to look normal and function normally? Well, once I got to Target, I thought, well, this will help. Except the damage had already been done at that point. Everything hit the fan on January 9th of 2022. Actually, I remember that date vividly. I came downstairs at my mom's house on a Sunday, and they were sitting at the table because they eat breakfast and whatever. It was my mom and my little brother Eli, and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna go use the bathroom real quick." I talked to them for a minute, and I needed to go use the bathroom, and I went to walk to the bathroom. So I'm walking through the kitchen, and my head just moves. I was just looking around, because that's, your eyes aren't just looking one direction when you walk. You're looking around. So I looked around. I looked down, and my vision went completely black for a solid second. Completely black, like I was blind for a good second, and that freaked me out. So my stomach, my heart drops. But when your heart drops, well, that's a strong emotion. And the stronger the emotion, the worse my pain would get. So that really hurt. And so I keeled over in pain when it happened. So first I go blind for a second, but then I keel over, so I don't even have time to think about what just happened, because now I have to think on the pain. I have to think about the pain I'm currently experiencing before I can even relegate brain power to what just now happened with my vision. So it's this whole thing that I always had to deal with. Well, I go into the bathroom, and then I just lock the door, and I hit the floor. I sit down, and I go, what just happened? So now I'm freaking out, and I'm going, whatever is happening to me, I knew it was getting worse and worse, but it wasn't as apparent as it is now. So I tell my dad, I said, hey, can you pick me up? Because his house was my safe place, because he actually believed what I was, talking about and experiencing. So, I I text him about it, and he goes, "Well, I have to wait until after work." So he picks me up after work, and I call my job, and I said, "Hey, I need to go on leave for 2 weeks." And they said, "Okay, that's fine. What's going on?" And I tell them what's going on, and the fact that I really don't know what's going on, but they go, "Okay, well, whatever." So I go on leave, and I thought, I just need 2 weeks to recover. No, that period was when I deteriorated the most. Apparently, whatever condition I had at the time, that I know of now, and I'll get to it, I promise. Whatever was going on was only being it was only keeping me functional. The only thing that was keeping me functional while dealing with whatever was going on was the slight amount of muscle that I had by working. Well, as soon as that started to go down as well, everything got way, way worse. Now I actually could not stand up to go anywhere. I was floor bound, not bed bound, because the bed would make me sink in too deeply and cause my symptoms to be even worse. I didn't know what was going on with me, but I just knew, well, if I lie on the bed, this is what happens. So the floor makes things better. Um, then it started to get extremely difficult sleeping. Whenever you start to go to sleep, your breathing rate slows down, and the breaths become greater. Basically, anyway, pulse rate goes down and all that. Um, but what was happening was, as soon as I would get into that lucid dream sort of state, um, my my breathing would not exactly stop, but what would happen is I'd exhale too much to the point where my diaphragm would spasm, and I would have to gasp for air. So there was one time during the month of February, I wasn't even able to make my own food. My dad would have to make my food after he came home from work. I was basically infantile, which was the biggest ego blow that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I'm not saying that I'm egotistical, but I'm saying that everyone has an ego to some extent. They have a perception of themselves, and they like that to be greater in the dominance hierarchy. And mine was completely rock bottom. It was the biggest blow to an ego that I've ever felt in my life. Having to get fed by my dad, and floor bound, and not being able to even use the bathroom myself because I couldn't walk to the bathroom. So that was something that I had to contend with. But the month of February just got even worse. Now I wasn't able to see my friends or my family, with all these other problems that was going on, and also this breathing problem. Whenever I would try and go to sleep, was getting worse. I one the worst day of my life. The worst day of my life was in March of that year, where um, I basically went 40 hours with no sleep, and I counted, and it was because every time that I would go to sleep, I wouldn't go to sleep because I would be gasping for air. So still, we're like, what in the hell is going on? I get rushed to the hospital. I remember telling the nurse while he's injecting me with an IV and all that stuff. They rushed me in, and I actually grabbed his arm, and I said, listen to me, as I'm in a crisis mode. And I said, listen to me, you might experience a death on your hands tonight, because I really do not know what's going to happen to me. So my pulse rate during this entire 40-hour period was still 130, 140 BPM the whole time. And so, like, and he's like, "Well, I really don't think that's gonna happen." And I said, "Okay." Um, well, I tell the head of the ER that day, I'm like, "Well, this is what's going on. This is what we think is going on. I've been seeing a chiropractor." I sort of left that detail out, but I was seeing a chiropractor for a while, and he would adjust me heavily, and he knew how out of whack all the structures of my body were. Um, and I said that it may have something to do with my vagus nerves being impinged on, but it seems to be an entire neurological thing systemically, um, and all the stuff that my chiropractor had suggested. And he says, "Okay." He leaves the room. They come back, they inject me with fluids, to hydrate me. They said that I might be dehydrated, and he comes back in, he kneels down to look at me, and he says, "Okay, I want you to listen to me. Every single thing that your chiropractor told you was complete voodoo science nonsense. What you have is anxiety, and you're dehydrated." That's what he told me. Um,
Holy
yeah.
shit.
So so then
Did you, like, try to slap him at that point? Or
no, I couldn't move. Like, I was in this was at the worst point in my life.
oh my
Like,
god.
I wasn't to be that hopeless and then to be told that too, like, when
That's
that
messed
that's
up.
yeah, yeah. So, what ended up happening was they injected me with Ativan, which is a benzodiazepine, and it was basically to function as a sedative to get me to sleep, to help me sleep, but also to quell my anxiety. And that did happen. It did quell my anxiety, despite the fact that I was recognizing after they shot me up with Ativan, I have been up for 40 hours and I am in fear for my life. I wasn't scared. It was really weird. That the stuff it works the way it's intended. I'll say that. Um, but then they let me go, and whenever I got home, shot up with Ativan, fully hydrated, so more relaxed, with 42 hours probably of no sleep at this point, I still barely got to sleep. I was still gasping for air. But I got 12 hours of sleep that day. Now, here's where things will actually start to be resolved. I know that I've really, really, really been teasing and tantalizing this entire audience here. I started to this whole time I've been looking into what's been going on with me, okay, and I can't really find anything. Well, eventually I find a post on Instagram, and it has to do with vagus nerve inflammation and all the symptoms that are involved with that. The person posting it was someone that is a complete charlatan, but it doesn't matter. I came across the post, and I thought it was interesting, and it looked like all the symptoms were things that I was dealing with, and so I looked further into what can cause vagus nerve inflammation. And then I saw that it was vagus nerve impingement that usually starts the process, and then degeneration, um, after the inflammation and the impingement has not been surceased and has been maintained for a long time. Well, then I looked into what can cause that, and I came across some condition called CCI, and it stands for craniocervical instability, which is basically characterized as an instability and laxity of the ligaments, with ligaments being what hold bone to bone in the cervical spine leading up to the cranium. So hence the name. Well, I came across a seminar about vagopathy, they call it. So vagus nerve, um, apathy, a degeneration of something. And then I'm looking into the whole seminar and how this condition CCI can cause it. And I went, bingo. I know exactly what's been going on with me. I have these structural problems that are coinciding directly with neurological problems that my chiropractor's been trying to fix up. And my ribs are all over the place as well. Um, Fun fact, he was actually not just adjusting my ligaments and my bones, but he was actually putting his fingers underneath my chest cavity and pulling my stomach out from under my chest because the stomach was moving so much that it wasn't staying in the position that it was supposed to. So I was really messed up, really messed
Whoa.
up. And I told my dad about it, and I said, Listen, I scheduled an appointment with this clinic that treats it regeneratively. Um, we have no hope at this point, so this is our only shot. Even if we need to just fix this issue." And he goes, "Yeah, man, like go ahead, schedule it." Well, it was scheduled for April. That was their soonest opening, so I had to deal with that 2-month period roughly. Just basically, dealing with all my symptoms. Fortunately, now that I had a date to look forward to, and I actually had hope in my life for the first time in a long time, it actually wasn't the worst period, the 2-month period. It was really bad, but it wasn't the worst. It was far worse. It could have been far worse. Well, eventually we drove down to Florida. So it's a clinic, Cary Medical Florida is the clinic. And we drove from Illinois, which is where I'm at, and we drove 14 hours to Florida in one day to arrive at my grandmother's house, who was an hour and a half away from the clinic. She decided to buy that house on a whim, a year or 2 prior. She didn't know why she bought it, but she did, and if she hadn't bought it, then I would probably be dead by now because we wouldn't have had a place to stay. I like, so I think about that a lot, a lot of the time. But anyway, I I stayed there and I had my first evaluation at the clinic on April 8th for this condition, CCI. I had all the diagnostic tests. They ran a DMX on me, a digital motion X-ray. So a lot of people, most X-rays are static. You just stand in one position and it's one frame. A digital motion X-ray will show your entire spine and how it moves depending on how you move. It's pretty high tech.
Hmm.
They did a cone beam CT scan where they do a CT scan of your entire head, like circulating all around. So they get to see vividly, and you get to see the scans as well. And it looks so surreal, like you're looking at an actual reconstruction of what your structures look like. It's insane, and
Cool.
it's vivid. And they do all these tests on me. They measure my diameter of my vagus nerve to measure for degeneration. It'll be smaller if it's degenerated. It'll be bigger if it's not. And they looked at internal jugular vein compression depending on what position my head was in. So it was all that stuff that they did. And the main doctor there, the main physician, Dr. Ross Hauser, came in and he looked at my scans on the screen and showed it to us in the room. He has this big TV screen on the wall, and he'll show you everything. Whether you understand it or not, the granular details, that doesn't matter. He gives the general gist of it. But what he told me, I was 18 years old at the time, freshly again. Well, no, actually, I don't even think I was 18 years old at the time. I was 17. He looked at me and he said, word for word, he said, if you had come any later, you were on your way for something catastrophic. And that's doctor talk for, well, we all know what. And we all knew what when we were sitting in the room. My dad and my grandma were there with me. And if anyone has actually dealt with problems before that were life-threatening or at least felt that way, just debilitating, you'll know that when you get a diagnosis like that, normal people would think that that's devastating to hear, maybe on the surface. That's actually relieving to hear that they actually found something wrong with you after years of people telling you that there was nothing wrong with you. They found the issue. So I immediately, when we left the clinic after they told us what we were going to do about it, and I'll get to that in a minute, I called my mom and I said, hey, you know, everything that you've been telling me is wrong. And I knew it was wrong. And here it is. And she said, well, I mean, I'm glad that you are in good hands. Here's the thing. My mom and I have a really, really good relationship now. What was happening was she was being heavily influenced by a tyrannical person. I think she knew all along that there was something going on, but she didn't really know what to do. And so she was sort of, you know, she fell into this trap of just, believing what he was saying as opposed to me. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not going to get into that. But, but anyway, we had a treatment plan. So what treatment do they actually employ? I said it was regenerative. Well, the treatment is a mixture of prolotherapy and PRP, platelet-rich plasma. Now, many clinics around the world, mostly in the United States, will employ this type of treatment, and I'll get into what it is. But basically, most of these clinics will usually do 1 or 2 injections of these. Basically, prolotherapy is a solution, which is a mixture of water, dextrose, sugar, basically, or glucose. Basically, a plant compound that promotes inflammation. Leave it to plants to do such a thing, right? And then, and and then I think there's a slight local numbing agent for the solution. So it's a 4-ingredient solution. And then PRP is the exact same thing, except what they do is, well, it's employed the same way, but it's not the same thing. What they do is they extract quite a bit of your blood and then they spin it twice to basically concentrate the healing elements out of it. And then they put that into the syringes and then they will use those instead. What it involves is injecting those solutions in between the bones into your ligaments. So they
Hmm.
go deep, and you can't be put under for this. You have to experience it, unless they do offer the option for up to $5,000 for Xanax administration, and they do have like $100 or $200 option for nitrous. But you cannot be put under for this. You have to feel all of it, so it's not fun. And I don't like discouraging people from undergoing treatment that may very well help them. And I'm going to get into how much it's helped me, but I will say that I'm not going to sugarcoat the treatments. They suck. They're not fun. And I'm not going to pretend like they are. Basically, though, that's what it involves. But the problem is many clinics around the world will administer 1 to 2 injections. Well, this clinic that I go to administers over 100 if you need it. And that's exactly what I needed. So at first we started on my neck, and it was very painful. It was very painful, but this clinic is the most hospitable and indulgent like clinic and medical atmosphere that you could ever experience. This is the best clinic I've ever visited, and most people that visit this clinic say the exact same thing. Lots of people fly from like the Netherlands, from other countries, many other countries to visit this clinic in Florida.
Wow.
In the waiting room, I will almost every single time I'm in the waiting room, you'll hear 2 people conversing in a different language. They're like it's really interesting, but and they're very high tech. But anyway,
Oh.
anyway, within a matter of, well, not even seconds, it was during the treatments, as much as they hurt, I was feeling better immediately. There was local swelling that was occurring, and swelling functions as a splint, and so it was stabilizing the area immediately, and so whenever I was walking around, I thought, "Oh my god," like, first of all, I was wheeled out in a wheelchair because it's difficult to walk when your neck you can't really turn it that well, but whenever it was starting the immediate inflammation was subsiding, I was starting to feel so much better immediately, and I was like, this is crazy that this is happening right now. Like I'm right. Like they're right about this. Well, long story short, ironic saying that since we're 34 minutes into the recording. Um, long story short, um, we ended up discovering that it wasn't just my neck. Every single ligament in my body was effectively deteriorated for some reason or another. We don't know why. Um, so basically, I have a condition called hypermobile EDS. We did a diagnostic test on me to see if I had the condition, and technically, if you were to illegally, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Derive my medical records from this clinic, you'll find that it's a negative diagnosis. But I want to be extremely transparent. The reason that it's negative is not because I don't actually have the condition in effect. The reason why is because usually hypermobile EDS, given that it's a collagen disorder because ligaments are made up of collagen, usually it also affects your vascular system because collagen lines every single blood vessel in your body. And so people can have really bad uh, cardiovascular problems if they have hypermobile EDS. I passed that test, so I don't have any cardiovascular problems, thank God. But since that's the case, they said, well, you're negative. You passed every other test, but you're negative on this. So it's a technicality, not a practical, like, in effect diagnosis. I have hypermobile EDS and I will stand by that. Okay. Like I absolutely have it. I just don't have it affecting my heart and blood vessels. But anyway, um, so yes, I have the condition structurally. And so we realized, well, the reason I'm experiencing so much pain when I'm experiencing emotion and all that stuff is because my ribs are all out of whack. They're all really weak and they're not holding my diaphragm in the way that they're supposed to. So basically, whenever you have the butterflies in your stomach or your heart drops, that's not just an emotion, that's a physical thing happening in your body. Your diaphragm is tightening up when that happens. But usually, what's supposed to happen is when your muscles tighten up around your rib cage, your ribs are supposed to remain in position. But that wasn't happening. So it was just pulling on my ribs every single time. And it was pulling on the nerves around there and impinging on the surrounding nerves. And all of your nerves, the solar plexus that regulate fight or flight, are in your stomach, which is why you feel those emotions in your stomach.
Oh.
So that was happening every single time, which would explain why when I lay down on the floor and expanded my ribs and all that, it would ameliorate the pain. If I tried to think of something that would elicit an emotion from me, it would go away. It was completely gone until I would like put my arms down and sink back in. It was still causing me an issue. Turns out my ribs are the most problematic when it comes to my entire condition, which is unfortunate. I still have the problem. A lot of people will see me in my videos. They'll see my neck go back and I'll do this to try and fix my posture. It's because I'm sinking into the chair because of my ribs. So I've gained, I'm all out of whack. This is haphazardly said, and I know that, and it's hard because my story is quite lengthy. I am now able to engage in some resistance training to help with muscular stability of my ligaments before I'm fully healed. And I've gained about 15 pounds of muscle in the span of this year.
Wow.
And it's, yeah, and I it's hard not to sound narcissistic when I say that, but it's pretty impressive by my
No, that's
estimation
pretty
as well.
impressive.
But
Yeah.
the thing about it is I should have more stability in my core and my back than I do with the amount of muscle that I have, but the reason I don't is because my ribs are not fully healed yet. So,
Mm.
since my whole thing is systemic, it's taken a long, long time for me to even get to the point where I am now, still debilitated, but able to actually, like operate in the real world, go to the store, go visit family and friends and all that stuff, engage in resistance training. I was staying in Florida for months at a time. I made some mistakes of coming home earlier than I should have, because I was, again, back to the whole I get ahead of myself. I actually told someone at work before I went to Florida. I said, "Yeah, I should be back at work in a month." Huh, it's been
Mm.
years.
Yeah.
So no, that's not happening.
Oops.
Yeah. I have not seen that person ever since then, and they probably forgot that I exist. So that's what happens. You never know when the last time you're gonna talk to someone is. But, I did make the mistake, but during that time, to get sort of towards why I'm even here in the space in the first place, what brought me to the space, during that time, um, I was changing my diet a lot because originally, before I even arrived at Florida and before January happened where everything hit the fan for me, I was starting to finally come to terms with the fact that, "Oh, maybe my diet may have something to do with how I feel." Now, it's not the root cause. It's not the root cause, but and I'll get to what the root cause is speculatively in a minute. But I was like, well, it wouldn't hurt, right? So maybe I should think about eating healthily because throughout my entire life, I could eat whatever I wanted and not gain a single pound. That's kind of how it was. Whenever I wanted to eat something, I would go eat it, and it wouldn't matter because I wouldn't gain any weight. And of course, as we all know, and as we're all subconsciously or unconsciously inculcated and indoctrinated with, weight is the only criterion of health. If you're skinny, then you're healthy. There you go. Slam dunk. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, anyway, what ended up happening was I started to really try and I started to consciously observe how I felt after eating certain things. And I remember going downstairs one night and I was just bored out of my mind. So I just decided to eat a bunch of grain based snacks and cereal and whatever. And immediately upon doing that, all of my muscle twitching that often occurred all across my body started to act up. It was like they all came to life. And I was like, what is going on right now? And I was like, I remember running up the stairs to the loft. And I was like, I need to look up, like, I'm gonna look up this silly, stupid little thing, like, "Are grains bad for you?" And I was like, "This is so stupid." Like, obviously, they're not. And I remember the first article that came up was an article by CrossFit Impulse, and I don't know what their site is. I mean, obviously, it's CrossFit, but I don't really this is the first article that I've seen from them, and it says, "Why grains are killing you." I went, "What?" Okay, so then I read it, and then I am opened up to the idea and the existence of lectins and phytates, and I went, "No way." So I sent it to my mom immediately, and this is my mistake, and I still have the habit of doing this. Whenever I find something that is like, "Oh, that's gotta be it," I roll with it and I go, "That's the cause of what my problem is. That's the cause." Do I have that habit when it comes to, like, scientific analysis now? Absolutely not. In fact, on my channel, I denigrate everyone that does that. I go, "So, okay, reductionism. Okay, so drawing causal relations based on one little association that may or may not be." Yeah, but whenever it's me trying to deal with my problems, I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's gotta
It's
be it."
totally that.
It's totally that, yeah. So, it's just like that's the flaw of humanity right there. Well, anyway, or a flaw. But, anyway, I started to try and adopt this, like, Whole30 approach. First of all, at first it was paleo, that wasn't really doing anything for me. Then it was this Whole30 approach where there's, like, no beans, no dairy, and no, grains and stuff like that. And that helped more than paleo did, but it still wasn't working. And then I had a dumb moment. I went, "Well, Eddie, lectins aren't the only thing in grains, or sorry, grains aren't the only things that have lectins in them. Like, how about I look for all the other things that have lectins and phytates in them?" And then I came across Dr. Stephen Gundry, who hyperfixates on lectins, and I venerated him because I adopted his diet because of desperation. And I read his book. I read the book, The Plant Paradox, and I was like, this is crazy. So not all plants are your friends? Like, really? They're not all plants have been, you know, evolved to be eaten by human beings, or rather the other way around. But human beings haven't evolved to eat all these different plants. And so I adopted his diet. That was it was the plant paradox diet. It was the lectin-free diet. And I tell you what, it actually made me feel much better than I was feeling. Probably because not only did I cut out a bunch more things that were causing me issues, definitely now that I know as much as I do now, but also I was adding in things that he encouraged, like pastured beef and eggs as well. He has the problem of trying to restrict protein intake, animal protein intake, to about well, he said what, like 10 to 20 or 20 to 30 grams of protein per day maximum, which is insane. Did I break that rule? Yes, I ate more than that, but that might have been why I was also feeling a lot better. Then you go to the Florida thing. I'm still eating plant paradox way, right? But then I start getting in my Instagram feed. I'm starting to look because I had nothing else to do. I was like, I'm just like I'm debilitated. So I'm going through these treatments and waiting 2 weeks to heal from it, and then I have to go on for the next one. Well, what am I going to do in the meantime if I'm completely debilitated? Well, I start scrolling through Instagram and I'm looking at health stuff. So there's a lot of Dr. Gundry stuff, and there's a lot of like Liana Warner Gray stuff and all this other stuff. But then I see Dave Asprey a lot. I'm seeing Dave Asprey a lot. And I'm like, okay, so he's similar to Stephen Gundry in a lot of ways. Except he prioritizes even more animal protein. So I went, okay, well, I'm going to eat the Gundry way, but I'm going to up my meat and egg intake. But of course, I'm going to drain the fat. So we're still getting there. We're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. So then I'm eating that because I'm like, well, even if Dr. Gundry's right about animal protein and how it ages you faster or something, I'm undergoing intense treatment structurally, which require more protein than the average person. So I just need to eat more anyway. So we're slowly getting there. And then I already knew who Paul Saladino was, and I laughed at him all the time because I'm like, how can you eat? First of all, I was like, how can you not realize that fruit sugar is still sugar? I even back then knew that. But I also was like, look at all that animal protein and stuff too. He literally has the aging diet down, like the diet that will age you the fastest down, right? Now, I actually still hold that viewpoint, but I held it then for a different reason. But the problem is that I ended up thinking, I was starting to listen to him because I'm not someone to completely write someone off based on their inanity level. I still listen to them, even if I'm laughing at them in the process. But the more I listened, I was like, you know what? Okay, maybe he's right. Maybe he's right. I still had my qualms about fruit. That was the thing that I was really worried about. And I had my senses in check back then because I still, every time I adopted his diet, adopted the meat and fruit diet for a month. And during that month, it was the only time that I had heat flashes, acne breakouts, blood pressure elevations, and overall feelings of bloating after eating. Immediately after eating, I was eating kiwis and honey, raw honey, and I was eating, plums, and I was eating pineapple, all this stuff with a bunch of ground beef that I was slowly starting to not drain the fat out of, but we all fat and carbs together. So as much as I was increasing fat, it's great to increase fat, but if it's alongside a bunch of carbs, actually it can have a worse effect. So because you're having all this stuff together. So it was making me a lot worse. And every time that I would bite into a kiwi, every time that I would bite into a sweet potato, I was having a lot of sweet potatoes back then still as well. Um, I had my qualms with it. I cringed every time I did it because I was like, man, I really, really hope he's right. But there's something, it just feels off. It just feels off. And we know now that, he is. But I watched a video of his about something called the Randall cycle. Now, I remember watching it and thinking, what in the hell is the Randall cycle? What is he talking about? Like, I have no ideas. But I was listening to him because I was like, man, I mean, he's saying a bunch of sophisticated things that I don't understand right now. So, I fell into the trap, and I'm far more sagacious now and intuitive now. But back then I was in, like, desperation changes your perspectives on everything. So what happened was he was saying a bunch of sophisticated things that I didn't understand. And so since I was in a desperate state, I went, well, gee, I hope he's right about this. And since it's sophisticated and it's more than I know, I'm just going to listen to it. Really bad mistake for average people to make, and people make it all the time. It's an appeal to authority. It's a problem, but desperation, it makes you weak, right? So that's what was happening. The next day, I came across a video by some weirdo with 32,000 subscribers by the name of Bart K. And I went, what is this? And it's the title of the video was, it was, um, it was, I mean, it was a critique of Paul Saladino's video on the Randall cycle that I had just watched the day prior. And I went, he's criticizing Paul Saladino. Oh, let's see who this guy is. It said on the thumbnail, who's wrong on the interwebs, right? So then I click on it, and I'm watching this guy, and I'm like, what a pretentious, narcissistic, abrasive, like gratuitously rude piece of shit. That's what I was thinking the whole time. I've told this to him to his face. He thinks it's funny. We think it's funny, but I remember watching it, and I was like, what an asshole, right? But what happened is at the bottom of the screen, I was starting to notice things the more I was actually paying attention. First of all, he was pausing every sentence Paul stated, and he was able to contend with what he was saying, which I was like, oh, okay, so he at least knows the concepts. This is interesting. I've never heard anyone else in the space understand what they're talking about in this regard. But not only that, it was after every sentence, which takes skill, like to extemporaneously just say things right off the cuff in response. So like articulately, something in a way that I couldn't do at the time. I was like, no, he knows his shit. So then I was like, at the time I was like, no, I was still saying in my head, I was like, what an idiot, right? Of course, what a position I'm in to say that with the amount of ignorance I had. It's always the most ignorant to have the most arrogant things to say. Well, at the very bottom of the screen, then I'm starting to notice things that says nutritionist, physiologist, and I'm going, oh, wait, I didn't think he actually had credentials because he came up on the screen with a robe and a coffee mug, and he had clearly just woken up. Like, it's not the most professional look. Like, he just sat down and was like, all right, so I just saw this video was posted, so let's just look at it and just, right? Well, I was like, wait a minute. So I watched the whole video, and I was like, oh, shit. So then I watched another one, and the next one was on Thomas DeLauer at the time. I went, I'm sold. Because at first I actually thought he was a vegan, believe it or not. And the first video I watched, I was like, well, most people that criticize Paul are vegans. So I didn't know his position, and I was like, oh, he's probably vegan. And then I'm looking, and I go, wait, oh, so he's advocating for 0 carbs. And then I was like, I've had my qualms with this before, with the carbs and stuff. So what if he's right? And then I listened more to Bart's videos, and then I sent them to my dad, who was at the time, he was listening to everything that I did, and he was just adopting it because, as I learned, he learned. And he was like, no, he seems to know what he's talking about. That was on August 14th of 2022. Then I went home for my birthday, which is in the same month. And I started very quickly. I was just binging Bart from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. I was like learning from his videos. I was watching every single one. I went to his other platform to watch his older videos as well, because I learned more about how he had restarted it and everything. And then within that week, actually, within the time of me getting home, I did a 2-week transition period where I was basically strict carnivore, but I was still eating a sweet potato because I know it's like you don't want to transition overnight. And then I was like a handful of walnuts still, and then I weaned myself off of that. And ever since then, I have been strict carnivore, and that has helped immensely with my symptoms, which I didn't know immediately. I didn't notice that immediately. It was whenever I would transgress later on. I dared to transgress about a year and a half to 2 years later just to see what would happen. And that's now every time I transgress, I experience the blowback. But it was helping immensely. And then later on, I'm still getting these treatments. Now I'm on the indicated diet for human beings. And now, more I was listening to Bart, he was talking about this Cerule brand. And I went, well, this is weird. This seems a little hypocritical, because you say that you don't need supplementation on the carnivore diet because you can derive everything that you require on a carnivore diet, right? So then what is this? So then I look into the supplement, and you quickly realize that it's just labeled a supplement. It's not a supplement. It's a nutraceutical, which basically can be synonymously compared with or categorized as an enhancer, a physiological enhancer. And the flagship product, Stem Enhance Outtro, was the one that I always heard about. And I was like, well, what does this do? And I learned that it basically causes the release of your own adult stem cells from your bone marrow into the bloodstream at a rate that, if you're older, will be returned to the rate at which you could do it at 18 years or younger. And if you are 18, it will just give you an extra bump, it seems. I was curious about it, though, because I was like, will it give me an extra bump if I'm 18 years old? Well, I might as well take it because it supports Bart, and also I trust him anyway. So, I mean, and also, what is there to lose? I'm in a critical condition still, despite all these treatments I'm getting, because I'm, by the way, in the top 10% of their cases, probably even more than that. They said I was in the top 10% of their cases when they saw my neck, not when they saw the rest of my body. So I'm
Oh
actually
boy.
probably even worse. That they've ever seen, not just like that they were currently dealing with, that they had ever seen and dealt with. So I was like, well, you know what? Hell, I probably need it. Well, I got that in October, and within a month, it was associated highly with a complete absence of a complete removal, actually, of the still extant shoulder and forehead acne that I've had for basically all of my teenage life. And I was like, well, this is weird because I've tried everything under the sun to get rid of this. And I thought that it was because of my hair in front of my forehead causing the acne there. And I was like, well, I still have the hair in front of my forehead, so why is that gone? And we know that acne is a manifestation of inflammation. Things that are red, swollen, and bump, all that stuff. They it's a manifestation of inflammation, and this thing can help. It's purported to be able to help with inflammation because these adult stem cells can differentiate into any cell that is in need of repair, and they'll just be new cells basically. And you do that with inflamed areas that are inflamed because of damage that have been done to cells. Well, of course, you can expect that to ameliorate inflammation if it does exactly what it says it does. And so, that protocol, the carnivore diet, which at the time was more strict than I am now, I still am pretty strict, but it was red meat only, and it was eggs, pastured only. So grass-fed red meat, pastured eggs, and grass-fed butter. And that was it for that time period for a year, or more, actually. And I was doing that, and then I was undergoing my treatments in Florida, and I have made, quite a bit of progress. The last note that I'll even add here, though, is that during the time that I was watching Bart, my grandma would overhear it, and she'd go, "What are you listening to?" And I was like, "You probably don't care that much. Like it's not something that you wanna see." She was like, "No, put it on the TV. I wanna watch." I went, "Okay, okay." So I put Bart on the TV, and she thought he was really funny. She found him really amusing. But later down the line, what was happening is we would watch him more and more because I was like, "Oh, if you like him, then I want this to be like, I want you to know this stuff too." And she believes what I'm saying too. She hasn't gone carnivore or anything. That would be really cool if she did. But she goes, "You know what, Eddie?" One day she goes, "You could do what he does, right?" And I went, "That's not true. No way." See, the thing about me is I'm my own worst critic. I'm my own worst critic. I'm a perfectionist, and so I'm always pessimistic. Like I'll make something that people would say is like amazing, but I'll see that it's like 95% perfect, and so then I only focus on the 5%, and I go, nope, that needs to be fixed. And so I never succumb to complacency, like ever. So but that has its faults as well. I was like, well, no, I can't do that, at least not yet, right? So then I tried to go to my dad for like the common sense perspective, and I was like, Listen to what my grandma said. She said that I could like do this. Isn't that like a little like far fetched?" And he goes, "Oh no, no, she's right. You could. I've been thinking it for a while." And then he goes, I said, "Wait, really?" And he goes, "Listen, man, if you're dead set on wanting to do that, I will invest $2,000 into equipment for you to start up a channel and do your own thing." And I went, "Wait, really?" He goes, Listen. I'm not giving you the money. It's a business investment, so I want the money back eventually, however long it takes. But I believe that you can do it very strongly. So I will invest $2,000 in equipment for you, and you can start your channel." And the reason he was more willing to do this was because at the time I had aggregated all of these different papers that I was writing about all the things that I was learning. I was writing papers on the cholesterol, saturated fat, and heart disease stuff, for example. And then I would add them to a Google Drive folder, and I go, "Here, guys," like all my friends and family. I was like, "Here, this is important. Look at this." I'd send them the PDFs. I did this for every topic. Vitamin C, like I said, cholesterol. I did it with fiber. I did it with so many things. And I laughed. I was talking to my friend, who is now my girlfriend at the time, who I live with. It's funny how things just gonna work that way. I said, "It'd be funny. Like I could write a book out of this stuff." And then I went, "Wait a minute. wait a minute. I actually, you know what? And I said, I think I'm going to. And she laughed, not because she was laughing at me because it was so silly. It's because she didn't think I was being serious. And I was like, and I laughed too. But I went, wouldn't it be funny if I could like in like 3 hours send her like a prologue and be like, actually, no, I did it. That night, I went out into my grandma's office, sat in front of her extremely dusty old thick iMac at the time. It was like one of the oldest iMac thick monitor screens. And I used the really old document, whatever thing, and I wrote my prologue. So when people read my prologue in my book, Contraindicated, and that's not a cheap plug. It's just it's topic of discussion now. Whenever they read that prologue, it has not been edited since I wrote that. That is a first draft. That is a first draft. And I wrote it. I sent her pictures, and I went, "Look at that." And she goes, "Holy shit, you're actually writing a book." And I said, "Yeah, now that I've started, I'm going to finish it." And for an entire 2-week period, I sat in front of I changed it over to a laptop. It was easier to write on, and it was more modern. And for 2 weeks straight, I sat in front of that laptop for 14 to 16 hours a day and wrote that book on Google Docs. That's what I did. And so my dad was even more willing to invest in equipment because he was like, "Well, you're getting a book out. You know, you're getting better and more proficient at talking about these things. So why don't you do it?" And I was like, "Okay, fine." So I started my channel up that many people are probably aware of now. 5,000 subscribers. So we're climbing up the chain there. But I started my channel January 1st of, no, I started recording January 1st of this year, but I started publicizing the channel January 20th, I believe. And now here I am promoting the carnivore diet, critiquing a bunch of people like Bart does. Some people have said I'm better than Bart, but you know, at the end of the day, I'm not going to say that because I'm standing on the shoulder of a giant here, because he's the one that started the whole thing, the whole the approach. And I guess the absolute final thing that I will absolutely say to finalize with is, yes, I'm an affiliate with Cerule. I was taking Stim Enhance Ultra. It has not done me any problems, and it seems to be highly associated with very good things that happened, especially with the acne thing. If I was even more messed up metabolically, it probably would have helped with a lot more than that, I believe. But metabolically, I have never been really messed up. Structurally, I have been. So different story. What I will say, though, is that the other products that they have that are based on their other formula, not their Stim Enhance formula, but their Cyactive formula that is particularly designed to reduce inflammation in a way that is not the way that pharmaceuticals do, like ibuprofen even. Those have had they have been, let me put it this way. They have been so strongly associated with improvements in my health, in inflammation that I still sustain from my condition because, you know, if my bones still move around too much because they're not tightened as much as they still should be, then they're going to cause inflammation and stuff in a way that I cannot ignore as much as I was actually trying to ignore it because I'm very jaded in today's society. Most people they promote supplements that don't have an effect on people. They just take it because they believe that they said it would work, and so I'm going to take it. This was something that I didn't think was possible, that a product could be so strongly associated with things over and over and over again. And people can refer to the previous interview that you just did with me for that. Because I think I talked about that in that interview. Maybe not, but
I think so too. I think so too, actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
But to the point where I'm sold. The stuff works, and so at least I believe it does, right? Because you can't make any
Oh,
cause and effect statements.
oh, trust me. By the way, anybody out there watching, I do have a blood marker video showing literal proof that it actually reduced because I figured out my condition of what I have or what I had. You'll see it in the video, and it literally shows one. It's a little complicated, but 1, lower triglycerides, and 2, lower CRP. You might say, how on earth does this affect triglycerides? Well, it affects it if you have chronic inflammation because you probably can't see it here, but there's basically like a little spot right here that shows an indirect indicator of hyperlipidemia and chronic inflammation. Because when I started the carnivore diet, I don't know what I'm getting rid of or I don't know if it's like a phytotoxin. I have absolutely no idea what's going on. But what I do know is it's constant, and it's literally, it's like with carnivore, it took my skin, just my chest, a solid 1.5 years to heal. So I have no idea what was going on, but I do know that coconut oil caused it, and I have no idea why. Maybe you know why, but coconut oil did seem to cause my chest acne because I removed coconut oil when I started carnivore, and suddenly about a year and a half later, then it all starts to go away, and as well as my face for that matter, and tons of other things. So really interesting stuff. I have no idea what it is though, but very, very, anyways, regardless, this is, hope you guys really, really enjoyed it because I really enjoyed it, and hearing his story, hopefully you can see just how effective, oh man, that's, and one, how effective carnivore is. Two, what determination will get you in this case, because yeah, maybe 1 month or 2 months later, and you might not be here if you were too late.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, honestly. So yeah, not only that, for that matters how well Cerule works, which once again, everybody out there, in my opinion, this stuff really works. He's
Right.
not the only one who says this. I had the exact same thought. I looked at this and I went, there's no way a supplement can do this. This is total BS. And then I take blood tests and see it and I go, okay, something's going on here. I don't know what the right. But now that I actually know a little bit more how it works, I'm like, of course this is why it's working. So yeah, once again, all really interesting stuff. To anybody out there who is skeptical of the carnivore diet, what would you tell them?
Well, I tell them that first of all, you have a reason to be skeptical. I understand that. I'm not going to say that they're stupid for being skeptical. I was skeptical as well. I was skeptical even when I adopted the diet, draining my fat still because I couldn't get my head wrapped around, the propaganda, or I couldn't get that out of my head. But what I will say is, at the end of the day, if you are someone that is struggling and nothing has seemed to help, then first of all, you have nothing to lose to adopt it, and you want to make sure that you properly adopt it. We say that it's a 6 to 8 week transition period is most appropriate and prudent. You don't want to do it too impetuously, just go right into it, but try it for even a month in many cases. Most people will see that they feel a lot better within a few weeks. Within a few weeks, I've seen people starting to feel better, anecdotally. And if you are someone that is not completely, sick, or maybe has just some one or two things here and there that are pretty bearable, but you don't really like them being there, and you are also skeptical of carnivore, or you laugh at the idea, what I would say is try it for a month and feel free to completely go back to your balanced diet or your vegan diet, whatever diet you're on. Try it for a month just to see what people are talking about is what I'd recommend. The best way of trying to turn people onto a different idea is to make sure that they know that you're not trying to change their mind and shift them over ideologically. You're just wanting to introduce them to the ways in which other people think. Like I try and phrase it like, "Oh, aren't you curious to know why people are saying this? Or aren't you curious as to figure out, why people are saying that they feel this way, or why this may feel this way for certain people? Don't you want to know what they're experiencing just for fun, just so that you can know what to say when or if you decide to go back on your other diet after a month?" That's actually the best way of doing it, because if you go in trying to say they're wrong, you're wrong, actually, and we're right, well, now they're going to, humans are naturally tribal. They're naturally, pugilistic, let's say. So, it's more prudent and effective, actually, to go ahead and say, "Hey, I'm not trying to change your mind. How about you just read or, uh, you know, try this real quick so you can get a better understanding of what people are talking about." Don't have to change your mind. Just understand what they're saying. That's the best way of doing it. So that's what I'd also say to those people that are not metabolically deranged, or, suffering from a bunch of ailments that are metabolically rooted, I guess, or not. In my case, structurally, it doesn't matter, because it's the diet has helped with my condition as well, despite it not being metabolic. So that's what I'd say.
There you go. Everybody out there, thank you again for Eddie for being on. By the way, what are some of the things that you'd like to share with people? Links, all of that. I'll put that in the description for everybody interested.
Yeah. So of course, my primary platform that people most often watch, but also that I'm most prevalent on and active on, is my YouTube channel. So e.goki_ is the channel, or you can just look up Edward A. Goki and you'll find the channel. Um, also, if people are curious about reading my book, which I highly recommend it, not simply because I wrote it, but or because I'm trying to make a quick buck. The reason I wrote the book was actually, fun fact, it was actually for me first, because I was trying to organize all of my thoughts. I was trying to aggregate them and organize them into a coherent message and position, ideological position. It was basically written to assess what are human beings supposed to be eating and how are they supposed to be living. And when you objectively view that and assess that and try and discover that, you arrive at carnivore. So it's an arrival at carnivore. It's not exactly a advocation piece right from the beginning of carnivore, and this is why you should do this or that. It's not me trying to defend anything. It's a search. And so, given that it was written for me first, and since it made sense to me and I organized my thoughts well, I thought, well, people can benefit from this. And so, since I thought people can benefit from it, then I recommend that people read that to get a better idea of how I think in the most cogent way possible and why I think the way I think. And so, yes, that book is on Amazon, contraindicated. I can send you a link to put in the description for that, or they could just search it up on Amazon.
It'll be in the link. I'll make sure it's in the link. Make it easy for everybody. So
Okay. But also, if people want more content from me, they can subscribe to my Patreon, which is just Eddie Goeke on Patreon as well. And then if they want to reach me, I have two platforms: Instagram, e.goki_ on Instagram as well. I respond to DMs on there. And then also my email is edgoki14@gmail.com. I reply to those first, actually, emails. So with that, I mean, that's pretty much it, actually. I might expand to other platforms as well, but at the moment, I'm a little busy, so I
yeah.
haven't been able to do that.
Same on my end.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Once again, I really like talking to him. He's one hell of a story, honestly. It's pretty crazy. In my opinion, that's inspiring for anybody out there who's really suffering. I do think that well, first, it might be difficult to find the exact cause of your problem in particular, but I think given the I don't know if I'd say the will or what I would call it, but given the maybe the determination, eventually you might be able to stumble across it. Or if you just spend as much time on Instagram scrolling scrolling over and over again, you might find it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. All right. There